programming. So next week, we won't have any programs. So you can take the weekend to relax if you like. But going into the summer, we actually have a pretty packed schedule. So we're going to have the Vajrayogini commentary in June, so check the newsletter for details of that. Geshe is going to be presenting this course for 2 of the 3 Sundays that we have left in June after we take a break. One of the Sundays, instead of this program, will be the Green Tara initiation. If you're local, we would love to have you come and maybe help out. Normally we keep our events at the library pretty minimalist, but for this particular event, we'll have to bring more stuff to the library. So if you're in like Burlington, Hamilton, Oakville, even the Toronto area, and you're able to help, that would be wonderful. And like I said, that initiation will be streaming online. I believe that's the 23rd of June. So the Saturday before that, which I believe is the 22nd, Geshe will give an introduction to Green Tara meditation. So that weekend, our regular programming will be paused. Next week, we have a week off, but other than that, a pretty packed schedule as we come into June. And then July will be much the same. I think the first weekend of that, I have a family reunion to go to, so the first weekend in July is off, but then the remaining weekends in July, all 3 of them, we have programmings. I believe we have some special programming, maybe 2 mornings on Mahamudra meditation, and then the rest will be our standard teachings of this series, Fundamental Texts of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. So now that everybody has gathered, please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee. I'll invite Geshe to sit, and we can get started. Thanks for bearing with me, and also, as always, thanks to Dave for making sure the sound is going well, because that's super important. See you soon. Hi, everybody. So can you hear me okay still? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much for your patience. Let us get started. Oh, gente suna. And you can hear Geshe okay? All right, we are good to go then. So Tashi Dele, greetings to everybody. Geshe hopes that your study and practice is improving, getting better and better. And so our gathering here today, in part, of course, is aimed towards achieving that state of perfect happiness. And actually to learn the methods so that any situation that we encounter can become a potential cause for happiness. So how do we do that? How do we take those situations and transform them into those potential causes for happiness? We take the instructions and we try to mix them together with our mind, right? Like milk and water mixed together into one essence. And in this way, we come closer to that happiness.
Porque temo tawa noji dea chirichi gares. Richi de ten noji maima soso ronge porque soadun jagya kachimo moyares.
So, there's different ways to approach listening to a teaching. Perhaps some people, they sit back and it's a little bit like watching TV or some kind of entertainment, right? It's just like sort of a passive listening. But another way to listen to a teaching is to try to take the instructions deeply inside and then to develop some feeling and some conviction in the instructions that one hears.
Ota te kachimo kandisire zalaba yina ta richi te tanganzo temotawa noji gayate ani chomebi soado noto kange cheki setin shuna temotawa noji okoro porque taton tani de tona o soso sel never many listen manene hele de ajuares.
So this way of kind of sitting back and looking at a situation like it's an entertainment or something on your TV or computer screen. It's not that this is something that is kind of negative, and certainly in some situations it is positive. So if we encounter a difficult situation that gives rise to useless thoughts, that gives rise to unwholesome minds, if we take this kind of passive observer attitude and just observe the situation and don't necessarily pay it any emotional energy, take it deeply within us, then that can help us maintain equanimity, even in those difficult situations, isn't it?
아니 저다 개바 뭐지 그게 니네 그게 대시기나 근데 진행다 처음에 배세도 노도르지 거를 때마다 노지 그게 야타바이나 아니 소소rel레지니까 디나 렐레도 쇼아지와레스.
So many scholars, many meditators have talked about this practice, right? That if we have these namtok, these discursive thoughts arising, if we have these unwholesome thoughts arising, just having this attitude of the observer, like they are an entertainment that is arising, this can help one maintain a relaxed state of equanimity, right? So that can be beneficial in that context.
다슬이나요. 되게 저는 처음에 좋아도 노도데 요아레스 저도.
So, of course, any person that we point to, most of them, they will have feelings that are unwholesome, right? They will have discursive thoughts that are unhelpful, right?
다 벽에 개파도 다 녀레 다 제토가 메나요서 녀레 된데 요아레스.
And in terms of scholars and practitioners, even if one is not necessarily at a high level, it's still possible to do something to work with this situation.
어다 개바소소노 간지도 요아르든지 강에든지 다 좋아든지 레비가라. 다코 레도 레바레테네 템보야 말이 깨지깨지 완로 그래스.
So one thing that one can do as a meditator or a scholar of the teachings is when those difficult feelings arise, one reminds oneself that they are not solid, that they are not permanent. They are momentary. They change from moment to moment.
단 느리토지 못다바 세세티니 온 것이 주토나 더 된데고 버게 롱가인도서 야보지로 해요.
And that's one of the seals, isn't it? All compounded phenomena are impermanent. And if one can develop kind of a conviction and feeling for that, right, that's really a door to cultivating equanimity as well.
다 돈보네 템보즈 템보냐데바이네 다티 초와테 두르두르로 노토데 두르두르로 오토네 강에 치르로야지 하레스.
But if we are in the habit of holding tightly onto that situation that is upsetting us, if we are holding on to that situation as being solid, what we will see is our mental state and our cultivation, actually they get worse and worse and worse.
다 솨바도 니지 컨트롤은 예미 제비 페세나 하고서라 어다 버게야 어다 든디게 내서 테르지 버게 때문에 노지 대야데 로마레스.
So seeing them as those unwholesome, difficult thoughts or those discursive thoughts as being like an entertainment or like a TV program that you're watching, creating that distance, that can be very helpful. But of course, when we speak about love, when we speak about compassion, when we speak about the wisdom realizing emptiness and so forth, with those types of positive mental qualities, we don't want that distance. These are things that we want to take deeply within our mind.
어다 나로 세대 할래비 개사고지. 그러와? 어다 세대 빼나 단다이는 가서 먼저로 차워도 다 강에 지킬래 손을 놓쳐 소와 뒤자지라 되는 소설 강에 지켜야 해.
So our mind is a little bit strange. Like, due to habituation, right? If we meet a difficult person, if we meet a person that we have trouble with, immediately a feeling of suffering and a feeling of dislike gets rooted in our mind.
다 캐파스고 다 리라고도 말아와스 칼렌 저와도 내라. 다 던디 여자 때게 뭐도 다 던디 태베가라. 소소로 푸게 가르쳐가. 다체 토보게 제시해 봐. 얘는 자시 존재 세비 시바 녀래 제사가 다 푸게 유지 태송소네 가와진 거야.
So for scholars, for practitioners of the teaching, right, there's many different methods to deal with this difficulty. If one is already quite familiar with the practice, already at quite a high level, actually when one meets that difficult person or that person who brings up aversion, one sees them as a precious gift, an object of practice gifted to us by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So maybe that's not easy, maybe that's a little bit too high level for us, but that is one potential way to practice. So, but to be clear, when we say that that's quite a high level of practice, that doesn't mean that one has to have reached realization to be able to practice in this way, right? In fact, when we say high level of practice here, what we mean is that this can be practiced by anybody who has real feeling, real conviction in the Bodhisattva path. And if you, without really seeing that you'd accumulated the causes and conditions, of course you have, but without seeing that you'd accumulate them, suddenly got a precious wish-fulfilling jewel in your hand, that would be an amazing feeling. And that's the sort of feeling these practitioners have when they meet those people that are more difficult. So if we think about it carefully, our situation within samsara, within cyclic existence, whether we have a good and healthy body, whether we have good friends, whether we have a pleasant place to live, actually we can trace all of these back to previous encounters with those difficult people. And so we can see this, how this practice manifests, if we look at the life of the author of one of the texts, Lamp of the Path, right, Lord Atiśa. He was worried that when he went to Tibet, he wouldn't be able to encounter enough difficult people to be able to maintain his practice. So when he took some companions with him from India, he chose some very, very difficult people to deal with. So, of course, most of his students, those Tibetans who became the students, they really didn't like these people, right? Really didn't think they were very respectful to Atiśa. But because Atiśa saw these difficult ones as a basis for his practice, he regarded them and he treated them as most precious, actually. In fact, it is said that one of those difficult people, when they passed away, Atiśa was still alive, because he was so grateful to the opportunities they gave him for practice. He had a stupa, erected for that person.
지체 가르레에서는 제위가 원래 강가트에 기택다 거의 생사치 못쓰게 하듯.
He explained when constructing the He explained when constructing the stupa that because this person was a basis for all of his practices related to patience, that he wanted to honor them.
다 깨자때서 못 안로게 되다. 다 대진 안조 벽에 여와시 도야겠다. 내가
So of course this was maybe a bit of a long-winded introduction, Geshe was saying, but it's really to help us to differentiate between situations and how, when is the appropriate approach to use in different situations. It's really clear that if you train just in this very kind of simple practice of a deep conviction of the faults of anger and a deep appreciation for the benefits of patience, your mind is going to be less disturbed. People will have more of a liking for you. You'll have more harmonious relationships with your friends, with your family, with the people at work, and so forth. In other words, you'll be more peaceful and more relaxed.
Control menu
So, in the texts, anger is likened to fire. And we can see that fire of anger manifesting in our world so clearly right now, with the wars, with the different conflicts, with the illnesses, the diseases, and so forth. And in fact, it is said that if you trace back to the subtle causal level, that even the imbalances in the four elements can be traced back to instances of this mind of anger. So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got the name of this right, because I've never heard it before. Maybe some of you have. So there's a special kind of equanimity, which is called the equanimity within the gaze of the Buddha. The equanimity within the gaze of the Buddha. And this is a very specific kind of equanimity. And, in this equanimity within the gaze of a Buddha, of course, there's no aversion or dislike. There's an equal appreciation of all. So when we say this equanimity within the gaze of the Buddha, a Buddha sees no friends and enemies, right? A Buddha doesn't have preference for some people over others. A Buddha has a feeling of closeness and appreciation for all. Do we have that?
So
there's three different kind of ways of cultivating equanimity. Actually, Geshe said there's many, but there's kind of three popular ones. And this is one of the more well-known ways of cultivating equanimity. It's equanimity within the gaze of the Buddha. So if we give you these list of three, it's equanimity on the basis of relative truth, equanimity on the basis of ultimate truth, and equanimity within the gaze of the Buddha. So a bit of a long introduction, but hopefully some useful things there. And really, hopefully you come away from this with a determination about the value of equanimity, about really wanting to be able to see all beings as connected and precious to us. And so it is with this motivation to be able to see all beings as connected and precious with us that we ask the Buddhas to bestow their blessings for our success in that practice. And we'll do the preliminary prayers now. Tumbai Jom Den De De Jin Sheba Dra Jom Bayan Dabar Zobe Sangye Reba Dan Shab Sudemba Dewar Sheba Jiten Kemba Kebuduwe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Tumba Sangye Chom Dende Pejawa Shaikya Tubailai Chazelo Chede Kyabsu Chi Chondende Deje Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Sonje Sheba Dan Shatsu Demba Dewa Sheba Shiten Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Temba Sonje Chondende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Kyausu Jiho Tumba Chondende Dejin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Sangye Sheba Dan Shatsu Demba Dewa Sheba Shiten Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Temba Sonje Chondende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Kyausu Jiho. We'll do a short mandala offering. Soji Begi Joshi Medo Jom Rirablinji Nedegen Badi Sangye Shindu Mete Buhayi Drogunama Dajima Chebarsho Idam Guru Ratnam Mendalaka Niryadayam. Refuge and Bodhicitta next.
Sonje Jelo
Sogi Chenom Lai Changchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chinjin Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benjir Sonje Joba Sho Sonje Shidam Sogi Chenom Lai Changchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chinjin Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benjir Sonje Joba Sho Sonje Chidam Sogi Chenam Lai Changchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chinyin Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benjir Sonje Joba Sho.
오야 다
So in the beginning then, connected with that motivation, we want to kind of begin this teaching with our mind in a peaceful state. Very important. So we have this motivation that we want to clear our mind. Very important to clear our mind of any unhelpful or discursive thoughts. And in this way we want to settle our body and mind. We want to kind of purify the mind and purify the winds connected with that. Think, I'm going to place my body and mind in a state of peace. Taking as the object of focus, as our preliminary object, observing the inhalation, the exhalation, the rising and falling of the breath, right? With calm, with stillness, I will observe that. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. Breathing in, I feel the breath within me. Whatever may be disturbing feeling or discursive thought arises, don't feel like you have to push it away, but stay back from it. Just let it rise and fall away itself. Those thoughts that arise, we can think of our mind as being like a vast ocean. And those thoughts are like tiny minnows, tiny fish that flit beneath the surface. They're there. They come to the surface from time to time. But they don't disturb the overall stillness of that ocean. Think my body and mind are peaceful, and I've been able to tap in to the fundamental nature of my mind, to that space of equanimity. So think that this field is of the mind is clear. And the ground of this still mind is like a basis in which we can plant the seed for positive mental qualities. When the mind is in this nature of equanimity and undisturbed, it's the perfect ground to be able to plant whatever positive seed we want and to have that sprout.
다 사회 요소 가 제수 아니 어다 대시 부서 주반주야 다 사회 아버지 답이 소마지.
I think we're going to plant the very best kind of seed within this fertile, this even ground of the mind. This is a seed that will bring forth the result of stable and perfect happiness.
소소 천디 년노지 마슬다와이나 신체 슬다와이나 대완대바도 누가만대바 녀바 지바이 소마지.
Based upon that equanimity, let's take the field a little bit wider and think any being that I gaze upon, whether human, animal, those I know, those I don't know, every one is just as precious as the person closest to me.
소소 천디 년노지 자침보 연바요 다 저체 몸벌어 되네 지바이 소마지.
There's many, many reasons why any being that we gaze upon is just as kind, just as precious as whoever is the closest to us, whoever has benefited us the most in this life.
소신이네 대시 부서 주바다 더 토야가다 짓도 지에 강가 주대요 다 되었더니 알레야게 내서지 소마지.
I think with this mind, I can definitely accumulate all of the causes and conditions necessary to achieve this result of perfect happiness and feel this is such a fortunate, amazing opportunity.
손지를 지도마를 걸어서 대한들이 지가 돌아 던지가 니바 자침부터 저야 당하러서 된 노지 세제 주고 치다 주기 소마지.
The Buddha, Tara, and so forth, it was all on the basis of a birth like this, conditions like this, that they were able to bring forth enlightenment. So think, based on these same conditions, I will strive to bring that forth so that I can bring benefit to all sentient beings.
Lama 가셨어.
알레 디레오라.
되긴데와. 다음에 단다 따지 기지 뒤서와스. 다대 오셔 동안서 돈이 그 같이 버지르다스.
So this sound, actually, Geshe wanted to make sure that it was kind of a resonant sound, so hopefully you heard it. So he wants to use this sound today, not just as kind of a meditative cue, but the sound can actually be an important kind of metaphor in order to understand emptiness.
단다 대니 초발라 지포한테도 니 고고 대니 볼 대니 초발라 대니 다실레서 와스. 다 대요. 그 지지라 대니 그렇 중앙지려 마도
So we can think that in terms of the sound, right, that the sound arose from two things. It arose from the bell and from the mallet. So when the bell and the mallet meet, a sound arises from that. So it doesn't arise independently in and of itself, but only through the meeting of causes and conditions. At the same time, while those causes come together for that sound to be produced, if we were to look for a stable existent sound, we would not be able to find it. So any phenomena that we think about, right, it actually abides in just that way. But we don't see that because we have this kind of mistaken conviction that if we were to look for a pinpointable solid essence, solid entity of that object, that we would be able to find it. So actually, emptiness is very important for us to understand because how the afflictions work is that they are reacting to this pinpointable, findable, really existent essence that they think is there. And the stronger that is, correspondingly, the stronger are the afflictions. So that's why emptiness is so important. So we know that this kind of appearance of something pinpointable, findable, some sort of essence, that is something that is essentially created by mind due to that misunderstanding. It's not something that is really there.
So the
closer that we can come to an understanding of this fundamental point, we'll find that correspondingly, the closer we get, the more and more the afflictions are diminished.
So if
it's not as if, right, I mean, because we're talking about kind of engaging with emptiness, understand emptiness, but before that direct realization. So it's not as soon as we kind of get some feeling for emptiness that the afflictions go away, right? Geshe is not saying that. But what he's saying, he said, is that actually it's almost as if the afflictions are like, it's like a really lazy person who's always tired all the time at the office. And they're kind of there, but they're not really doing anything. The afflictions will become a little bit like that. Sorry, Geshe said that he was thinking of like, what kind of example can I use for that? And that's the one that came to mind, but maybe it's a little bit too heavy. But let us just call it an inefficient worker or inefficient staff then. So of course, you don't want an inefficient worker, a lethargic worker, but actually what we want to do is bring forth emptiness so that the afflictions are more and more lethargic, more and more unable to bring harm. And the other thing to understand is that when we speak about the emptiness of inherent existence and so forth, that this is not something that was created by the Buddha. Right? This is simply the way things are. It is the reality of how things are. So whether the Tathagata, whether the Buddha came to this world or not, things would be empty, right? There would be this emptiness. The Buddha, in his teaching, he was able to explain ways to point out this emptiness. He was able to explain why there are benefits to understanding this emptiness. But this emptiness was not created, right? It's simply the way of things. So it's the way of things, it's how things are, but the Buddha had to explain it. It's a little bit like a father and a mother when they have a child, right? They have to teach the child, for example, how to sit and be able to use the utensils to eat a meal and so forth. So it's a little bit like that. So we have to see this ultimate mode of abiding. We have to be able to see the way things are, even to have a meaningful temporary happiness, much less to achieve that perfect happiness that we were talking about. Sorry, much more. Sorry, go on. Sorry about that. I don't know why I said that. Yeah, and so the other thing too is when we say for the sake of all sentient beings, we can say if we want for myself and all sentient beings. But one thing to be understood is that within that category of all sentient beings, we ourselves are definitely included. So for all of those sentient beings to be able to achieve a state of a perfect happiness, right? All of the methods are contained within these texts on these stages of the path. So how fortunate are we to encounter them? I just want to adjust something so we can see everything.
okay, the last. That's the issue that the
Sorry, I'm back. Just a moment. Sorry, having a bit of tech difficulties, but I think it's resolved now. I can see everybody. Yes.
Really?
Oh, JJJ. Dila dinga hakukire.
Could you trust?
Oh, yeah.
That's how you asked it. Marin and the
Yeah.
This
All right, we are back. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, that's all the Kotumbo Alangas. Our
So because this text on the lamp of the path to enlightenment is kind of the root of all of the other Lamrim texts, including the one by the fifth Dalai Lama, we'll actually begin there. Yeah. And then in addition to this, of course, as much as possible, we will also go through a little bit the oral transmission of Mañjuśrī. And so just to mention within the sacred words, within the oral transmission of Mañjuśrī texts, there's a lot of very long histories and biographies of various masters. But Geshe is not going to go through all of those biographies in their entirety, right? We want to get also to the points of cultivation.
Oh, that was this one. Oh, yeah, that got to say, you know, say, Tomba Shonju, Debachaba, Lama no Jitemba, Tan, Shebashas.
So last time we left off, we talked about verses number 6 and 7, I believe. So just with verse number 6, for those noble beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by spiritual teachers.
That did Jachimorda, in a generation between Tan, Shebasha, Ta Chevachi, Shira Chevachi, the Dizonatianite, that any Pajiwazona, Halevi Jachimoyatis.
So we touched a little bit upon that last time, what's meant by perfect method, and together with perfect method and perfect wisdom, we have sort of the two facets of the path. But also within perfect method and perfect wisdom, there are, of course, many, many, many other branch practices that must be cultivated.
That Pajiwas, there's Shevayina, and it's so you send a Satcha. Only Lamunga, they just sell this death on our Chimboyar.
And so, what are some of these? And actually, if you're able to keep these in your mind, even just recollecting them can be a source of great merit. So, we can speak about the 5 paths, which we did last time. We can also speak about the 10 grounds or the 10 bhumis. This is something very important. Also, within this, we could say the 6 paramitas. The 6 perfections as well. The 4 ways of gathering disciples. All of these can be included in the majority within method, right? Except that last perfection. And the other thing that you need to remember from last time is the Mahayana lineage when it's activated. At what point is the Mahayana lineage activated? And also, at what point is the Mahayana path actually entered? When is that door actually opened and one enters? So if you hear last time, hopefully you remember those 2 important points. And also in terms of activating the Mahayana lineage, we talked about how it's important to clear away the obstacles that prevent its activation. There are 4 obstacles to the activation of the Mahayana lineage, and so actually within this human rebirth that we have now, it's one of the best conditions to be able to clear away those 4 obstacles.
차 총화도 셀타 나좀 강에 지바래 냐도 말아와 대지 대대 리세비 바지 저도 잡아서 대지 셀 냐도나 오지세 요레스.
So of course, all of the instructions that we hear, there's many things. It's difficult to remember all of them, but if we could remember these points as well as the point about the 4 obstacles that prevent the activation of the Mahayana lineage, that will be something very useful. I see like a change on my screen here of a red light flashing. Do I need to be worried? Hello? Dave, talk to me. Oh, there we're back. Okay, thank you. Listen,
다 당기 대지셰비 통설라티네 돈요고 봐서 대지 셀 냐도나 오다 지세 침보지레스.
And also, with what we shared today, one important point that Geshe would like you to remember if you can is the equanimity that is cultivated within the gaze of the Tathagata, the equanimity within the gaze of the Buddha.
다 서디 셀 냐도나 그거스 돈요고 서 디와스나게.
And, if you want to remember a little bit more, you can remember that type of equanimity as well as the other 2, equanimity based on relative truth and ultimate truth, for a total of those 3 modes of cultivating equanimity.
다 바지 이제 뭐지 하고 그러더니 사바사바 얘는 치셔발라 초유 이제 봄바스 치드발라 생지에 들드발라 초 대사도 사야도 되네 매배
So when we talk about the 4 obstacles to arising or activating the Mahayana lineage, the first of these is lacking the facilities to practice Dharma. So it means that we kala manta mebada tu mebada. So it means that we don't have the essentials like food, like clothing, like a place to live, and so forth. And so all our energy has to go into that, which doesn't allow us to practice, to activate the lineage. Because of course, if you don't have a place to live, you're going to be spending most, if not all of your time trying to secure that, right? And if that's your situation, you don't have much time left over for practice.
자치칼 냐르지가 마 냐주케지 계지 마위아테르지 른도지 비자야라 와스 다 디게 고자는 데자바이나 사야도 티아찬노 그문데 리라오레 디와스
수다서
저체 레비바
알레 야보 코마송 터타키니 코마송
야 대조 그때는 저체 레비바
말레 디하고 소이네 중디도나 코마송
시시오스 냐주케지 냐치즈
야야
냐마스에 게니르지 디마 유그라 와냐 제고노
야야
하고송
노 코마송
야 냐가 제고노 저마도 들이 와라와 마유야
야야
주는 요거 말아왔지
알레
데르노지 비자야라와
야야
오늘 데키테스하는
Kodisagre. Ale. So Geshe was speaking about one of the great Mahasiddhas, or the great practitioners of the practice of Chakrasamvara, and his name was Luipa. And actually, he kind of solved this problem of not having enough to sustain himself, that he kind of subsisted on fish guts. So the things that the fishmonger couldn't sell, that people did not want to eat, he would eat those. And in this way, he sustained himself without any problem.
하고서를 다 퀴컷 자치칼 파트니 정도들 다 고문 자사 상내지 가운데스 자는 도비 알았어.
네.
자치칼 레베칼 다 드니 논로 지마테르 좀메바지 그게 슈치 뭐 알아왔어. 다 디잖아. 칼라테 짠는 갈리라오지.
So Luipa, right, he wanted a place to be able to abide undisturbed in meditation. And so he was kind of looking in many different places. And he came to, I guess, a cove by the ocean where there were some people that were selling fish and getting rid of the intestines and the entrails. And he thought, oh, actually, if I stay close by to here, I'll never have to worry about procuring food. And that was how he chose that place of meditation. So of course, it's not easy, right, to be able to practice in that way, but this is an example of the renunciation of these practitioners.
Jipu Lama ji san shivares.
Re.
Jipu Lama te Los Angeles ko gojane devares.
So one of Geshe-la's teachers, and in fact this was the teacher who he received the oral transmissions of all of the collected works of Je Yabse Sum. So that means Lama Tsongkhapa and his two disciples Kedrupje and Gyaltsabje. This particular Lama, he was actually connected with Drepung Monastery. It was said that he meditated in seclusion for a total of 30 years.
Ko jagan luwal tani sakuju ji le gembachi yo sarawas. Des tani wona. Gembate do tani wo ko gembate pa de yo mar koro trago no gojane de. Gembate so tomatri mayu yo yares. Ko supete de de siru komozo. Ko te tani chulu Los Angeles.
So the way he sustained himself for 30 years without having a lot of sponsors and things was he found a kind of secluded monastery in the mountains. And he didn't stay within that monastery, but he had kind of like a hut attached to a cave nearby. And so what he did is, whenever the old tormas were carried out of the assembly of monks, he would take those tormas and he would let them dry. And then he would have little bits of food through which he sustained himself. And he lived that way for almost 30 years. Yeah. So just to say, that these are not kind of fables or stories of people long in the past, right? That there are still practitioners with kind of such determination. Yeah, so this is a person who, Geshe-la met, right, within his lifetime, and so we know that it's a real thing, that there are still great practitioners like this amongst us. So coming back to this idea of the 4 obstacles that prevent the activation of the lineage, the first of this, right, not having enough to eat or drink, this is one obstacle that most of us are without. So we don't need to worry about that one. So the next of the 4 obstacles, number 2, is the influence of harmful friends. So even if we ourselves are not kind of engaged with much of what is unwholesome, if we're close to people who are engaged in sinful activities, through their influence, we can also fall into that path. So this is the second obstacle, right? The influence of harmful friends. Yeah. And we see that so many people actually too who cause problems in the world, they maybe didn't start out as a bad person in that way, but it was through coming under the influence of those who were harmful that they ended up in that sort of mode. Yeah. So very high practitioners, not recommending this for us, but very high practitioners, they say, may those thoroughly evil beings who bring evil into the world not have a long lifespan, right? May they have a short lifespan. And so behind that, what other meaning can we understand? May those who benefit, may those who bring benefit to others, may they have long lives. So, of course, maybe these the words seem a little bit heavy, but if we think about them carefully, right, they have a very sound meaning. And so we also perhaps have managed to avoid that obstacle of being too much under the influence of harmful people. So that's 2 of these 4 that we don't have. The third one, the third obstacle to the arising of the Mahayana lineage is being indentured or being in service to kings and the like. This one's a little trickier. So maybe we don't have kings, but we might have a boss at work, and so we are kind of indebted to him or her and have to kind of carry out the tasks that they give us, but we're not indentured the same way as to a king. The fourth one The fourth obstacle to the arising of the Mahayana lineage is actually the toughest one. And this fourth one is habituation to the afflictions, habituation to the unwholesome minds. So two of the main ones would be attachment and anger, but also, we should familiarize ourselves with what these afflictions are, and we should really examine within our mind which of those afflictions is more prominent. And then, in accordance with that, we should cultivate its antidotes. If we can, as a beginner, develop a little bit of feeling for this and a little bit of feeling for cultivating the antidotes, then we can also be able to get to a state where this attachment and this anger are not causing as many problems, are not as pernicious. If we're able to combine this with cultivating a realization of emptiness, and we are able to reach the state of what is called an Arya, or a superior bodhisattva, there will be a little bit of traces of attachment there and anger there, but they are attachment and anger in name alone, right? They won't be able to cause many problems. They're incapacitated. So think about how skillful the Buddha was when he gave teachings to different levels of disciples, right? So as beginners, we hear again and again from the Buddha about the drawbacks of attachment, about the drawbacks of anger. But as we kind of ascend the bodhisattva path and reach a higher level, eventually, right, we can transform that attachment, for example, into something that brings benefit to sentient beings. So the Buddha was so skillful in presenting things for people at their level. So the Arya Bodhisattva, there's kind of this journey, right, between when he or she is an Arya Bodhisattva and then they reach that Buddhahood. And as they come to kind of the last increment before reaching that Buddhahood, there's still a trace of attachment there, because that's not completely eradicated until full enlightenment. But that trace of attachment is not really able to cause any harm. And some people think that, perhaps this teaching about transforming that attachment into something benefit, this is exclusively a Vajrayana or a Tantra thing. But actually, this is incorrect. We also see mention of this in these sutra teachings as well. So if we're able to kind of practice method and wisdom together in a holistic kind of steady way, this is the great benefit that will come from that. So verses number 7 and 8 were on page 5 for those of you who have the text. In the presence of paintings, statues, stupas, and other representations of the perfect Buddha, offer flowers, fragrant incense, and whatever else you can afford. With the sevenfold offering also taught in Samantabhadra's aspiration to good deeds, and with the thought never to turn back until attaining the essence of complete enlightenment. So a lot of kind of words here and allusions in these two verses, but there's also an easy way to keep the essence of these instructions in mind. If we familiarize ourselves with the Jorwe Chutruk, the 6 preparatory practices, with the Yenlak Dun, with the 7 limb or 7 branch practices, and with the Nyempo Topji, the 4 opponent powers of purification, then we have the essence contained within these verses. And so the 6 preparatory practices, the 7 limbs, the 4 opponent powers, these are very, very important things that we all need to practice. Yeah. So it's just like it's just like we need to engage in exercise every day. We need to engage in these practices regularly. Yep. So you'll see in verse number 8, it mentions the 7-fold offerings. So there's actually 2 ways to understand this mention of 7-fold. We can think of the 7 limbs or branches, which were just mentioned. We can also think of the 7 offerings that are represented by the water bowls, right? So water for washing, the libation, the flowers, the lamps, the incense, and so forth. It can also be understood that way. So it's actually greatly beneficial for you. You come to a great profit if you can, secure a statue of the Buddha or a tanka. That's very wonderful. But even a simple picture, if that's what you can afford, in a very nicely arranged place, and you can engage in these kind of offerings, you will come to great benefit from that practice. So you'll remember our conversation from last week where we talked about these 5 paths, and the first is the Bodhisattva's path of accumulation. And we said that the path of accumulation is divided into 3 increments: small, middling, and great. On the path of accumulation, in this last increment, great, it is said that actually when we look upon representations of Buddhas like statues and tankas, we actually see an actual Buddha. So it's no longer like a statue or an image. It's an actual Buddha that we perceive on this level, and even that Buddha is able to teach us and interact with us. So there's many